So welcome to this webinar. I'm Neil Wilkins, and this is Seasonality in Marketing. And if this is a topic that is new to you, I'm hopefully going to be sharing some very, very interesting insights that will hopefully whet your appetite to delve much more deeply into this fascinating topic. It is absolutely vital for everybody in this day and age to be focusing on seasonality. And I'm going to take you through some of the ideas and tips and tricks and things to be thinking about if you're building campaigns or building a plan. This is the Cambridge Marketing College Professional and Personal Development Series. And if you are here for the first time, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to you. Hopefully you're going to find this one really, really fascinating. And if you are back for a repeat episode, so you're coming back in and you've been here before, then you'll know the format. We're going to be using the Q&A and the chat facility as we go through this. So you are very, very welcome to, if as I go through the presentation, before the Q&A at the end, if you have any questions or any observations, I will endeavour to answer those for you. So use the Q&A in the menu bar or the chat feature, and I'll keep an eye on the messages that you're sending through, and hopefully, as I say, I will endeavour to answer those as we go through this. So just give me just 1 second. I just want to begin the presentation, and then we will be kicking off. And as I say, Q&A at the end. So I possibly might not answer your question actually whilst we're going through this, but there will be a Q&A at the end. So I will encourage you to share some information as we go through this. So seasonality in marketing, a very, very hot topic for everybody involved in marketing, business development, growing a business, and in essence, really just trying to understand what is actually going on out there in the big wide world. My name is Neil Wilkins, and this is the second in the 2022 series for Cambridge Marketing College. And we are looking at a whole host of different topics. And this one for me at this point in the year is really, really vital to be focusing on, because we are all affected by cycles, habits, loops, trends, seasonality, patterns, you name it, we're affected by it. So my question that I would like you to take with you as we go through this webinar is the question, how are you affected by cycles? Now, when I talk about a cycle, it's any repeating pattern. Okay, so if you see, both personally, both professionally, and actually in nature and everything all around you, if you see things repeated, then it is very, very likely that that is a pattern or a cycle. Okay, so I want you to have pen and paper or keyboard ready and be typing away or writing away every time you think of something, every time you spot something. Think of how you are affected by cycles. Okay, and this isn't with any judgment. This could be positively affected, potentially challenged by cycles. They could be serving you, or they could be the bane of your life. Whatever the answer is, we're not looking for the answers yet because we'll come on to that. What I'd like you to just be aware of are the various and varied cycles that potentially will be impacting you as you go through your everyday and working life. Okay, so my big question to you as we go through this, how are you affected by cycles? So there are numerous different cycles that we could be talking about. And before we can kind of get onto the topic of seasonality in marketing, we need to kind of really open up the Pandora's box of all the different types of loops and patterns that we see in the world around us. So the first one, which is probably the most obvious one that I want to focus on, are the cycles in nature. Okay, so when we talk about seasonality, we all know what we mean when we say the seasons. But what other cycles do we see in nature? Well, there are the moon cycles, so the lunar cycles, and they can have a profound impact on all of us, both personally, but obviously the weather and the tides. I mean, clearly a very, very clear cycle that we see. The tide goes in, the tide comes out, very much affected by the lunar patterns. Right now, we in the UK here are in the depths of midwinter. It's not particularly cold today, but we are seeing a lot more cloud. We're seeing a lot more rain. We're seeing a lot more of the colder weather. It's a season. So we see seasonal cycles really impacting us. We also see weather patterns. Now, these you might sort of think, well, it's not that predictable. You know, it either rains or it's sunny or it's hot or it's cold. But weather patterns follow cycles. And even when you look at the plants and the flowers around you, those are following a cycle, the life and death cycles of plant life. So it really, really is all around us. And wherever we look, we can see these cycles. So which ones of these would you say potentially affect you? Add those to your list. Which of the natural cycles do you kind of really spot? Are you kind of more aware of? Because we're going to go into the awareness and also the ones that are going to potentially affect you as before we get into the kind of the seasonality in a professional sense in marketing. So we need to kind of understand what these are. Now, let's bring this really close to home to help us understand this question. How are you affected by cycles? Let's think about now the human cycles. Circadian rhythms, those are fascinating. You know, we all follow an ebb and flow of energy, if you like. So some points in the month, we feel like we can win at everything. We feel full of energy. And that is probably to do with our circadian rhythm. Okay, so if you're interested in kind of the energy flow of your sort of month by month cycle, then just search out circadian rhythm, because you'll find some fascinating insights there. We haven't got time to kind of dwell on many of these. I'm just bringing these to your attention before we get into the seasonality in marketing. Another one is the menstrual cycle, clearly a very, very regular repeating pattern, which again, you can say is kind of similar in some ways to our hormonal cycles. And this affects all of us to a greater or lesser extent. So how are you being affected by cycles? How are they impacting on your life? The energy flow, what you're able and willing to do at a certain point in the month or during the year. Very much on a day-to-day basis, we see the sleep and waking patterns. Again, these are cycles. You know, you can't, as a human being, get away without needing sleep. Some of us don't need too much sleep, some of us do. But it's all about the cycle. When are the best cycles? When are the best sleep patterns that you can actually take? And how are these affecting you? And also then from a human behavioral perspective, the calendar. You know, there are many, many calendars throughout the planet, across the world, that demand our attention, that make us do things at certain points in the year and certain points in our calendar. So how do those affect you? Do they affect you in the positive, or do they challenge you? And of course, even down to the point of celebrating certain festivals, certain religions, certain cultures celebrate things on a cyclical basis. So it comes at us from all different shapes and sizes, all different styles. And so when we stop and actually pause here, we are all being affected. So my question at the outset was, how are you affected by cycles? Do any of these human cycles, do they kind of rise to the surface and you think, yes, actually that one really does impact on me significantly, either personally or culturally? And then when we move into business, you know, a lot of us are working in a commercial sense, or we have a profession. And how is the concept of cycles or seasonality affecting your work cycle? Because all of this comes into the mix. And work cycles will be things like the stock markets, any kind of trends in seasonality that may affect your products and the way that you serve customers. A product life cycle, for example, every single product that's ever been in existence has a life cycle. It grows, it develops, it matures, and then it declines. And you might think you've got a product that is immune to that, but I can tell you, you haven't. Every single product that was ever created and that has ever been is working its way through a life cycle. It is just the way of the world. So how are those affecting you? Your customers' buying patterns. Sometimes customers can be really, really challenging. Sometimes customers can be very, what seems to be unpredictable. But actually, if we look really closely, they're not. And I'm going to come on to that. Customer buying patterns, significant impact in our work cycles and loops and habits and trends. And even the effect of something like a solar flare and how that can have an impact cyclically on our technologies, on our human behaviors and the way we interact as a society. All of these things are the effects of cycles. So I'll revisit, come back to the question, how are you affected by the cycles? Some of these might have just jumped out at you and thought, okay, there's something in there. I often see this, I often experience this, because before we can get into the cycles of seasonality in marketing, we need to be thinking about those cycles that are directly impacting on us right here, right now. And once we begin to uncover some of these little signs, these little indicators that something bigger might be going on, we can then start to recognize as we operate in our professions and whatever profession we're in. I know a lot of people obviously listening to this right now are in marketing and business development and sales, and they're entrepreneurs. They might be in startups or mature businesses, and they will understand, and a lot of you will understand that every market, to a greater or lesser extent, shows some amount of seasonality. And this, of course, will impact on how we plan, how we develop our campaigns, how we go to market. And so by getting a deeper understanding of those cycles, of those trends, of those behaviors, of those loops, of those repeating patterns of seasonality, we stand a little bit of a chance to actually control how we then operate as an organization or as a business to get best value from that scenario. But if we just assume that, it's all about us, we really are genuinely missing a trick. So it is time to kind of wake up to seasonality, and that's really the point of this. Now, of course, for a lot of us, we are consumers. A lot of us consume products and services from other marketers, from other organizations and other brands. And a really obvious example of seasonality in business and in marketing is high street retail. And when we think about high street retail and fashion houses, we know that they plan at least a year ahead. For a whole variety of different reasons, they need to. And for most of this, it is because they have very, very complex supply chain or value chain. They need to keep up with production. They need to align what they do with a very complex chain of activities and relationships with other organizations to ensure that products can get onto the shelf for us as consumers to buy at the right time. So a lot of that seasonality that we see happens way, way in advance. So high street retailers and fashion houses tend to be doing their planning for what is coming next year. So at least a year ahead, and often in some cases, 18 months to 24 months ahead. So the impact of seasonality in an industry like that is absolutely huge. It almost defines what they are as an industry. For some of us, that level of seasonality is a much more subtle thing. And so I'm going to assume that for most of us, it is at that subtle level. So that's what we're going to explore here, how you can begin to uncover seasonality opportunities in what might be not too obvious an industry that you happen to be in. Because for me, that's where this real kind of deep dive, this almost forensic way of looking at your business comes into play. And for me, that's really where it gets exciting. But of course, we need to understand as well that if we are in an industry or in a sector where actually, even though we might not recognize it, there are massive peaks and troughs for where products are relevant for only a very limited amount of time, it is time to get serious with seasonality. Now, the really obvious example for a lot of us are the sort of cultural and festival type events in the calendar that happen each and every year. So for me, I work with a lot of organizations where Christmas is a very, very significant peak of activity. It just is, because of the products and services that a lot of the brands that I encounter face, is that towards the end of the year, so in the sort of October, November time, they're seeing a huge peak of activity, a huge peak of demand for what it is they do. So in some industries, there is this massive peak, and then of course followed generally by a trough. And you kind of go into that almost like sort of mini within your business, a mini recession. So things recede, the demand disappears, the revenue drops. And so for a limited period of time, you have to, and the phrase that we often all hear is making hay while the sun shines. In other words, making sure you're maximizing your revenues at times when you're in a peak, and then actually going into either hibernation or into a planning phase when things are in a trough. And knowing the predictability of those seasons and that seasonality in those cycles allows us to do some really effective planning. Now, you might think, oh, come on, Neil, you're really kind of telling us the obvious, but we do need to kind of get into this kind of mindset before we explore the how we can solve some of these subtleties. Okay, so what I'm doing is really kind of sort of setting the scene and painting the picture for where we're able to go. Now, this is a really kind of business-focused conversation. Okay, so seasonality in marketing as a concept is very much able, if you can do this thing correctly, and if you can really get a grasp on it, it's able to really drive your bottom line. So this goes straight to profitability. Okay, so if you can do this stuff right, it has profound impacts on both the revenues that you bring into your business, but also then the profitability with which your business operates. So this isn't just about marketing communications. This is about the wider kind of impact of seasonality in marketing in its holistic sense. So when we say marketing, we're not just talking about social and digital and comms. We're talking about how marketing impacts on your business from a strategic angle, to help planning, to help the phasing of what you need to provide great customer experience and value throughout the year. Okay, so whatever marketplace or industry you're in, understanding this can have a huge impact and can really drive and help you to improve the results that you see from marketing. So this is very, very kind of practical stuff as well as being strategic stuff. So that's why I always kind of feel quite passionately about, integrating this into everything that we think of when we're talking about marketing, because without it, we're kind of doing stuff on our terms, and that kind of misses the point of where the customer or where our suppliers are at any given point in time. So let us get to a point of getting super macro with this. Okay. And so what I mean by getting super macro is, let's take a way number of steps back away from our organization, away from our business, away from day to day, and look at the biggest of big pictures. Okay. So macro is when we begin to look at kind of what's going on in the big wide world. So we can't touch it. We can't really affect it, but it will impact on us. And I want to introduce you to the economist, Russian economist, who has done some incredibly powerful work in the concept of cycles and loops and trends and patterns. And this economist is called Kondratieff. Okay, and you just need to search Kondratieff if any of this resonates, because this is fascinating stuff. Okay, so but this is super macro. This is not something that's going to be able to be sort of introduced into your business directly. But what it will do is it will give you the broader context of what is coming. Because if you can predict what is coming and you know what is coming at a more effective level than your competition, well, guess what? What happens? You get competitive advantage. So that's what I'm going to try and introduce to you here right now. So go search on Kondratieff, Russian economist, who introduced the idea of the Kondratieff wave in economics. Okay, and there are many, many examples of this. But basically what Kondratieff did, and he was working sort of way back, we're talking a couple of hundred years ago now, but he saw a pattern that had emerged, that everything in economics, so every economic cycle, everything in the stock market, everything in terms of consumer demand, everything in terms of customer behavior, everything in terms of kind of what happens in society. So the propensity for societies to go to war, for example, everything operates cyclically. Everything, absolutely everything that we do as a human species, economically and commercially, and beyond that, society-wise, operates in a series of cycles or loops or repetitive patterns of behavior. which makes it predictable. So he went back to the early 1800s and projected forward into where we are now. And this is what is really, really exciting, is that everything that Kondratieff has said has come true. Okay, so this is not a Nostradamus kind of, I'm going to project what's going to happen in 2000 years' time, but this is Kondratieff, a very experienced economist, saying, I'm seeing a pattern here, and we all need to wake up to this pattern, because if we can actually see what has happened and then project forward, we stand a chance of, as business people, as marketers, as economists, of actually striking while the iron is hot, of actually making hay while it's sunny, and actually making our marketing most effective. So what did he actually see? Well, what he saw was that business, economy, stock market works in, or has worked into this point, and I'll come on to where it's going in a moment, but has worked in cycles of between 30 to 40 to 50 years. Okay, so you will see a drop, you'll see the peak and a trough in a cycle of around about 40 to 50 years, if you look back over kind of 200 years. So what does this mean to us? Well, what he did is he said, okay, well, it's a little bit like the cycles that we see seasonally. In other words, as we kind of hit a peak, well, let's call that the summer, when everything is flourishing, everything feels great. And, from a stock market perspective, you'd call that a bull market. So where everything, stock prices are going up, there's confidence, it's boom time. And he would call that the summer. So when you hit the peak, it's the summer. You see a little bit of an autumn where, everybody's cashing in, everyone's feeling good. And then you decline seasonally and cyclically. And as a repeating pattern, you then decline into the winter. And as you decline into the winter, as what we might term the bear market, things recede. We see recession. We see confidence drop. And we see, organizations and sectors kind of almost going back into their shell. And this has happened time and time and time again. We are into what some people are saying is now the sixth Kondratieff cycle, the sixth Kondratieff wave. And I want to kind of share that with you, because it opens up what we as marketers or as business owners might wish to see coming forward in our marketing in the not too distant future, that can really open up opportunities for us. But let's just have another little look at the Kondratieff cycle. And if we just focus in just for a moment in terms of things like economic confidence, we can see some really interesting patterns. Princeton Economic Institute back in 1997 issued a really, really interesting report. And this is back in 1997, where they said that come 2020, we would be hitting the bottom of a trough in economic confidence. And guess what happened in 2020 and through 2021? Probably one of the deepest drops, one of the deepest pits, one of the most significant troughs that we've had, coupled with a pandemic. So that was back in 1997. And this isn't here by looking in a crystal ball. This isn't here by magic. It's here just by looking at the trends and the cycles. So if, as we think, we may well have hit statistically, and using Kondratieff and going really, really super macro, big picture before we drill down into our own businesses, if we think we're actually right in the depths of a trough, or have been over the last couple of years, we know from the statistics and from the cycles and the wave, there is only one way, and that way is up. And so what have we actually seen as we've looked at these cycles, where there are lots and lots of different examples? If you just go and do a little bit of a search sort of on the web for examples of Kondratieff's waves. And we can see that this has been super predictable over the last 200 years. And it has shown us when we've seen changes to how economies have, changed the whole kind of marketplace and the whole way that we do business as organizations. Back in the early 1900s, when, automobiles and oil was in its boom, that is what we saw. In the 1940s and the 1950s, we saw a huge spring and summer. And the autumn there was when, some organizations, became, sort of multi-billion global conglomerates. And it was because they were there at the right place at the right time. And then we saw a trough back through to the 1970s, to the early sort of mid 1970s. We saw a trough until information technology cut in. And what happened then? We saw another spring, summer, and autumn with the back of digital data. We saw, the internet became, sort of super, super significant to all of us. Digital opportunities came into play. And then what happened? We saw decline. And we saw the financial crisis in 2007, 2008. But what happened then? We started then to potentially move up. Now, this is really, really interesting stuff. But when you look at it from a macro level, what does it really mean? You can look at this and say, okay, yeah, I can see what happened. And yeah, I can see all the graphs. And if I've done a search, I can see, loads of different examples of, where this may be the case. But what about to me? This is still macro, Neil. What, something I can actually use. Well, here's the thing I want to share with you. If you look at Schumpeter's waves, which are an extension of Kondratieff's economic cycles, we can see a very, very interesting trend, is that the first Kondratieff wave was very much 60 years, okay? The second wave, and this was what you might call the Industrial Revolution, for example, became 55 years. Waves since then have become slightly and subtly shorter and shorter and shorter. And the fifth wave, the wave that's brought us to where we are here today, has been down to just 30 years. So it started in the Kondratieff model as being 60-year cycles. We're now down to 30-year cycles. And I think for lots of us who have been in business for quite some time, we can kind of sense that intuitively, that things seem to just be speeding up. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means the opportunities that might have been a little bit out of reach back in the day are now going to be within reach if we start to take this stuff seriously right here, right now. On the basis of, we have just come through one of the deepest troughs that we have seen in living history and in living memory. So the interesting thing then is, okay, so let's just project a little bit forward as to what might be coming next. So if we know that this next cycle is not going to be just all about what we've always had. And of course, a lot of us are still using the phrase, oh, I want to get back to normal. Well, I've got news for you. There is no normal. We are moving forward, because life this side of pandemic, which has been one of those amazing great resets for economics and great resets for marketing, as well as society-wise, this gives us an opportunity to reposition, to pivot, to reinvent what we're looking at going forward. So still staying slightly macro, but now coming a little bit closer to home. One of the things that we are very clearly seeing as we come through that last peak, which was all about information technology, digital, and a global community, the next big message that is coming through from a lot of people who are looking deeply into this, and a lot of the big research houses, a lot of the big global marketing or management consultants are looking at this as well. And one of the themes that they see is holistic health. Okay, so you don't have to be in the health industry to take this one seriously. This is huge as an opportunity. So we've gone from mass transport, mass production, mobility, information technology. The next one was part of the next one. The next big Kondratieff wave is going to include holistic health. Now, if you have been in business for anything over 2 or 3 years, you will know that 2 or 3 years ago, health and well-being was on the periphery of all of our conversations. Right here, right now, it is right at the core. Now, when I said about this whole kind of wave really, really narrowing and really peaking up, this is going to happen faster than we've ever known it. This kind of seasonal cycle is going to happen quicker, and it's going to be a higher, more intense peak. So holistic health and well-being is on that peak. Okay, so there's the first little thing to bear in mind here. And I'm going to come on to how we can kind of address this, irrespective of what marketing we do, irrespective of which sector we're in, irrespective of which industry. Holistic health is on your radar. Okay, you can choose to ignore it, but it is coming. What else is coming as well? Well, there are some other themes that we can see. So if we look, just take a little step back just for a moment before we talk about those, if we all accept that the biggest, deepest peak that probably in our lifetimes is going to be the biggest one that we will ever experience, 2020 and 2021, let's just call that the big marketing correction. Okay, so I'm not going to get into anything political here or anything like that. I'm just talking from a marketing perspective. This is a big, big correction. Your old marketing planning, your old marketing mix no longer applies. Okay, the game has changed. The question is, what are you going to do about it? So what have we seen in this big marketing correction? Well, we've seen the pandemic. Obviously, for some organizations, that has been a game changer in a positive sense. For others, it is mean that they're out of business. But the pandemic has hit. That is one sign. Another sign has been the economy. A lot of markets have gone into recession. Others have grown, but a lot of markets have shrunk. Okay, many governments across the world have helped to, ease that burden. So we will see a quick rebound. But is that from the political activity in those decisions, or is it just the Kondratieff curve saying it's going to happen quicker? I don't know. We'll see. Time and history will bear that one out. But the economy has changed. Community has changed. Community and collaboration and co-creation is now the thing. You used to be able to operate your business in isolation. Your marketing used to be all about you. No longer. You've got to include everybody in your stakeholder community. Society is also part of the big market correction. How do your customers buy from you? You possibly didn't have any kind of e-commerce the previous side of the pandemic. Well, let's not call it the pandemic. Let's call it 2020, 2021, because everything has changed. And you're working from home, the societal blended working now, where you don't go into an office and you don't pick up your tools and go somewhere. You can actually be doing a lot of what you do, particularly if you're a marketer, remotely. It used to be a thing that, nomadic marketers like myself would actually be doing. Now everybody's doing it. And to think where we were 2 years ago, this is the big marketing correction. And the other thing as well, which is in the mix, which was there on the periphery, but now it is facing you right head on, is planet. Okay, so from a macro perspective, these are all things that come together in this trough, but will emerge as we go into the spring. We're emerging now into the spring of the Kondratieff wave as much as we are into the spring of 2022. So this is the moment. Okay, I can't tell you this story any more powerfully. This is the moment. And there are 3 themes which are coming through in the research, they're coming through in the media. And if you just listen to all of the commentators who are using things like the Kondratieff wave to predict what's coming, and all of the big research houses and management consultants will tell you that digital connection is the next big thing. Now, you can call it the metaverse. I'm calling it metaverse in marketing because I think that is where it's going. But digital connectivity, and I mean digital connectivity in its truest, broadest sense, your business, your organization, your marketing needs to get a grasp on how that is going to be impacting you. Okay, so we're not here to kind of discuss the answers in their deepest sense yet. Just get this on your radar. Second theme, holistic well-being. Massively, massively important to be factoring that in. And by that, I mean is how are you helping the outcome of your customers integrating into your business? How are you helping them to experience your products and services so they get great outcomes from you? How are you providing an holistic well-being value to them? In other words, how are you making their world better? Because if you're not reflecting that in your marketing, one of your competitors might. And as we've seen, this is a big wave that's coming. We already know, we're already seeing it. You talk to colleagues, we're all talking about how you're feeling. We're using this word feeling rather than thinking now. It's here, it's live, it's right there in front of you. Now is the time to jump on that wave and figure out if this is one of those seasonal cyclical patterns. Here is one of the answers that we need to focus on. So the question is going to be, how are you going to do it? And the third theme, and I love this one because we all need to be paying big attention to this one. This is the big sustainability one. Okay, we know this is here, absolutely here, no matter where you are on the planet, whatever industry you're in, organization, big, small, startup, wherever you are, we've all got a part to play. So the third theme is purpose driven. In other words, your customer, your suppliers, your resellers, whoever you are and wherever you are in the supply chain of providing value to your customer, you need to be sharing, and you really do need to be sharing your story about your purpose. And the purpose is your bigger commitment to the value that you're bringing to the world. It's not just I sell this product. It's not just I give you this service and you pay me money for that. It's the bigger story. What is the reason that as a group of people you get together on a day-to-day or a month-by-month basis to provide value to customers? What is your true higher purpose? So for me, at the spring of 2022, these are the key messages that we need to be focusing on. Okay, so that's the macro seasonality in marketing right here, right now. And it's simple. It is not complicated. It's predictable. It's forecastable. But of course, the big thing is it is right here, right now, staring at us. And this spring, as we move into spring, as we go towards summer this year, but also in that Kondratieff curve, we know it's going to be fast. So now let's translate the big macro into our marketplace. Okay. So for some of us, seasonality is as simple as just getting into the consumer's mindset. So whoever our customer is, who consumes our products and services, and literally just making sure that we're there to motivate them to engage with us at a greater or lesser extent at certain points in the year. Okay, and we're going to use those three themes alongside the value that our products offer to give them value. And for some of us, it could be literally as simple as that. You might be sat there thinking, I know this stuff, but thanks for the three themes, I'm done. Okay, I can put those into my plan and I'm good to go. But for most of us, it is a lot more subtle than that. So we've got to start to figure out, maybe using this new marketing mix, some of the things that we can do. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a checklist of things that you might want to note down, of things to think about. Okay, so these are little tasters, little teasers. I'm not going to kind of be able to go into, because we haven't got the time to go into huge depth on any one of these, but I'm just going to give you the framework of things to maybe think about and invite you to note some of these if you think they might resonate for you and your business and your marketing. So in the new marketing mix, let's think first about people. Okay, so the idea in seasonality and marketing, if we're focusing on people, is to think about keeping our customers engaged and buying all year long. Okay, so we're coming right into kind of what we can do. So things like offering off-season specials. So we know that prices drop at the time when, you know, there's an excess of supply. So in those really popular things, you know, maybe the pre-Christmas stuff, everybody's doing sales and come buy from me, prices drop, availability of stock is there, etc., etc. But what happens after that? What happens when you go into your little local dip, your little local trough? Well, maybe off-season specials might be a great way of doing things. Maybe holding some form of contest or giveaway, maybe kind of really sort of, you know, focusing in on the value that you bring rather than the actual sale. So maybe some sort of loyalty campaign or maybe some sort of VIP event. There's things you can do which don't necessarily result in direct sales, but infill those quieter periods. So maybe when it is quieter, to keep engagement going, to keep customers encouraged to buy, maybe use the troughs in your sales cycle as you go through the year to maybe look at relationship building. So rather than marketing being all about we've got to drive sales, we've got to drive leads and inquiries, maybe at those quieter times, maybe focus on the people, really the people, and start to think about, okay, in those quieter times, we know we don't sell because we never do. We've got the patterns in our sales data that show us that. Maybe that's a time to get really intimate with our customers, build that professional intimacy. So from a promotion perspective, the next one, the next P in our new marketing mix, the promotion bit. So maybe just be super simple, super relevant, and super timely. And maybe in those quieter times, begin to show the value that you're going to add when you know there's going to be a peak. I mean, a lovely example is travel agents. You know they're always going to show you summer images, people diving into the pool and having a lovely time. It looks so warm in those images in the middle of the winter. Because what are they doing? They're trying to make you not buy last minute, but getting you to buy in those times when maybe you're thinking about it, but you're just kind of making those decisions. You're not actually going on holiday. So what they're doing is they're infilling those times by making it more enticable, making it more make the propensity or make the encouragement happen at times when it's a little bit quieter. And it is our responsibility as marketers to kind of do this infilling. So maybe looking to encourage at different times of the year, different styles of buying behavior by showing people and making it enticing as to what it will look like later in the year if you kind of invest in yourself. And you can do this by really, really starting to take a deep dive into some of the data. Now, the obvious place to start is looking to see if you get any seasonal patterns on, for example, your website traffic. So looking to sort of research, actually what are the kind of things that are happening in the off season versus the on season. So when you see those peaks happening, what is actually going on? So don't just think, oh yeah, well, it created sales, so we put a campaign in there to make sure we get it. Understand the why. Do people search differently? Do people kind of interact with you differently when you see a peak versus when you see a trough? It's really important to know some of the granular level of detail rather than just thinking, oh, it's our busy time, let's get busy, let's do a campaign. Okay, it's a quiet time, let's just stop doing our marketing. Don't stop. Use those quieter times to do this deep dive analysis. If you are now, here we are in January of 2022, if you are in a quieter phase, you've just got that little moment because you've just come out of a peak of activity. Now is the time when you get down and dirty with your data, when you get really into the data and you kind of look for those patterns. You've got some patterns. If you've had a peak, you've got some patterns to look at. So get inside that data, really understand from a promotional perspective, what else could I be doing in these quieter times? And it is all, of course, about thriving during the off season. For most of us, this is what marketing is all about. Often in the peak season, the peak times, marketing almost takes care of itself. People know where we are, they know what we do, they know the value. We've kind of done that through maybe organic social and all that kind of stuff. It's the infilling and thriving during the off season that's key to the success of seasonality in marketing. So let's look at our processes. Let's look beyond just the marketing communications. Let's look at the highs and lows of our industry. Are we actually in sync with what's going on in the rest of the industry, or are we kind of doing something a little bit different and seeing a different result? And what can we learn from that? Maybe in the quieter times off season, we can begin to explore new income sources. One of the great examples sort of around where I live over the last 10 years have been farms who have reinvented themselves. They do in the off season when they're not necessarily able to create a big sort of output in terms of crops or animals or whatever it happens to be that they're farming, they will actually rent out their land to outward bound companies to do team building, or they'll create a little kind of section of the farm for rewilding, and they'll do other things, and they'll bring eco groups in to explore and do research. Looking at new ways of exploring new income sources is a really, really good thing you can do to infill those off seasons. From a process perspective, the next one of our P's, you can also be looking and thinking about the seasonality of your business. So hiring seasonal employees, do you need the same amount of resource all year long? And this isn't just about, employees. Do you need to be sourcing products in a different way? Maybe get a little bit more smart, a little bit more, short term with the cash flow analysis that you do. So maybe you can get your business to a point where actually you don't need to be hit so hard in the off season. Maybe you can reduce your costs, which means you don't have to be making quite so many sales during the off season. So playing with this broader marketing mix, and particularly thinking about things like something like process, allows you to get really quite intimate with what's going on in your business. It's not just communications. It has a business touch point right the way across. And of course, with process comes the seasonal demand and this kind of fluctuation depending on the time of year. So use the predictability of this trend to really allow you to make sure you've got enough inventory available to you, and you will be able to then make sure you can have the right value at the right time without losing share, without losing yourself to the competition, without losing that customer loyalty. So if you can get the balance in process, in this marketing P, this is all about striking balance. This is all about filling those quieter times with the right stuff. It may or not be possible to create additional sales in the quieter times. So professional intimacy, reducing costs, looking to fill in, maybe pivot completely what you are as a business in those quieter times. If you have capability or competency in doing certain things, that could be the time. And doing this without waiting until things get tough. So mending your roof when the sun is shining, planning and learning in your off season is one of those key things. I know a lot of organizations who, just because the calendar says you should be planning, they plan at the wrong times. They're planning when they're super busy. And of course, then it's paying lip service to the planning. Do the planning when the timing is right for you. But do it when the sun's shining. Do it when things are going well, because as we know from these cycles, what's the next thing? If you're doing super well right now, is that you're going to see a bit of a decline. It is a cycle. It is going to happen. Reflect on it, accept it, be vulnerable to it, and see what you can do to accommodate it. So it's not only people, it's not just promotion, it's not process, it's also pricing. What we'll also see within the seasonality is that we can see huge price fluctuations. The demands for special offers, for discounts, for kind of real incentive buying. And, you have to reward me and do a sale if I'm going to buy from you at this time of the season. We're all falling into that trap a lot of the time. And this is one of the biggest challenges in marketing, is doing the right thing for your customer and value, and not just getting into the race to the bottom in terms of pricing, because a lot of marketplaces do this. They feel almost subservient to the broader market pricing. But if you're providing value, if you have that customer intimacy, that price debate goes out of the mix. So figure out from a seasonal basis, if you can, actually be a little bit smarter with the way that you price, and don't just necessarily fall into that trap of we have to discount at this point in the year. Challenge yourself. Ask yourself, why do we discount at this point in the year? Are we actually just giving our revenues away? Are we giving away that profit margin? Could we do something better? So make sure when you're thinking about this, you factor in price as well. It's really important, and obviously has a really profound impact on the profitability at the end of your year. And there's something that would be worth, if pricing and discounting and feeling subservient to the marketplace, if that does impact you because of the kind of industry that you're in, I would suggest you do a little bit of deep research onto the concept of seasonal adjustment. So if you do a search on seasonal adjustment, this is a method of what we call data smoothing that allows you to kind of smooth out the price points that you have, smooth out those peaks and troughs which might not be serving you as a business. Because it's all very well for me to say, oh yes, trim your business back when the going gets tough, but that's just a theoretical assumption that you can do that. So if that becomes a very hard thing to do in your particular industry or your particular business, because of the way you've chosen to set it up, or because of the way you've chosen to market it, or because of the way that you have opened your channels up to serve customers, then search on seasonal adjustment, because there's lots of different ways that you can get super smart and actually maybe improve that kind of financial performance within your business going forward. And it is obviously very important to do that, because we're talking about the value here of seasonality in marketing, not just what you can do. But there are some things that you can do really tactically. So I just want to spend a few moments just talking about some of the tips for seasonal marketing that you can focus on. And there's some really, really nice stuff that you can really start to play with here. So this is where I suggest, you get the little checklist out, or you get your pen and paper or your keypad ready to type here, because there's some really, really great stuff. Now, here's a lovely little list of 6 things that you can think about if you're doing some seasonal marketing. So this is really, really super tactical now. So we've gone from the real high-end sort of macro stuff, and now we're down into what can I do if this is my quiet period of the year. Okay, and this is a good one from sleeknote.com, and they've got 6 little tips that they say for seasonal marketing really, really work. So number 1 is build a seasonal email list. In other words, go into your email list, into your database and customer management system, and figure out the time of year when people are buying. Figure out the time of year when, and this is down to an individual basis, when specific customers are more engaged, respond to you, engage with you, contact you, are more likely to give you a review or a recommendation, and are all obviously buying from you. Get seasonality into your email list, because it's not rocket science. What are you going to do then? Well, you're going to market to those who are have a higher propensity to buy or more likely to engage with you. So build seasonality into your email list. Promote seasonal product categories. So break all of your product categories, and however you do them, your portfolio of product and service that you offer. How can you then build some kind of seasonality into that? Are some of your products and services more suited to certain times of the year, or the seasonality as you define it as a business? From a communication perspective, build anticipation with a countdown timer. In other words, if you're going to do a special offer, and if you fall into that trap of we're going to do some discounts, we're going to do some sales, build anticipation. Get people to kind of really have to earn the right to get that value from you. Give them a countdown timer. It really does work. 10 days to the big discount, 5 days before we can accept you onto the loyalty scheme, 3 days, 1 day, today only. Give them a countdown timer. It works in seasonal marketing. Use season-specific testimonials. Okay, so actually really focus down into things that made a difference to people at certain times of the year, so that you look, and somebody I used to work with, Jim, this one's for you because this was your big quote, get current, relevant and informed. Okay, I love that mantra. Jim Hardcastle taught me this one years and years ago. Current, relevant and informed. This is about seasonality. So everything that you do, customizing your product guides, creating seasonal offers that look and feel like they're part of the season that you're in, or the period of time that you're in, if you have a cyclical sort of marketplace. So it could be the seasons that we're talking about, spring, summer, winter, etc., or it could be something that just happens because the way that your market works. I mean, if you're an accountancy firm, obviously the end of the tax year is a big one in terms of the cycles. So what kind of happens around that? Create seasonal offers that look and feel like they apply to that season, and not just generally, and that you've kind of just rolled them out because you want to, because you're a bit lazy. Get things to look seasonal. Create a seasonality calendar. Kensa Creative, Kensa creative.com, have created a lovely visual, which is a kind of color-coded wheel, if you like, for what you are going to be producing on a seasonal basis. So do it right across the year. And I would say, starting out, less is more. See if you can just do one thing this month, one thing next month, and as you then see success and change, add to it. Okay, so create yourself a seasonality wheel, the things that you're going to do. Date it, actually set yourself some targets, put seasonality into your communications plan. This is a hugely powerful thing, to allow yourself to just pace yourself. So you're doing the right things at the right time to provide the best value, but also the best profitability for the business. Next thing that you can do as well is to really put some detail around some of these key times within the year. Victoria Green on buzzfixer.com did a lovely, lovely blog, and you can search this one out. It's a really, really good one for planning out the year of very obvious peaks and troughs, allowing you to piggyback onto the seasonality that's going to happen anyway. So new year. great time of year to start with subscriptions. Get people at the start of the year when they're doing their resolutions to begin to subscribe to you, subscribe to your program, subscribe to your loyalty scheme, subscribe to your course, subscribe to your follow-up service, whatever it happens to be. People are much more open to subscribe to new things at the start of the year. Around Valentine's Day, sharing and advocacy statistically and research is a higher thing that people are going to be doing. So if you've got some kind of seasonality thing going on, you're doing special offers, you're much more likely to get them shared and more advocacy to happen around Valentine's Day. Don't ask me why. It's just one of those seasonal cycles. Awareness days. See if some of these awareness days really resonate with you, the kind of thing, Veganuary and World Be Kind to People Day. I made that one up, but you know what I mean? There's all of these awareness days. Donate to an appropriate cause. Get people working with the seasonality of those things. They are part of the mix. They're things that you can piggyback on. When you see seasonal slumps, Victoria would suggest that you hook with a pre-sale. In other words, even if you know people aren't going to buy, pre-sell stuff. We see this in music festivals. We see this with gig tickets and things like that. Pre-sale is a great way when you know people aren't going to buy because they either don't have the money because it's not payday or it's just not that time of the year. Do a pre-sale. Figure out how you can do that. You might think, we don't really do that in our industry. Maybe there's an opportunity there then. Black Friday, we've all encountered Black Friday, so maybe thinking about flash sales all the year round, using the countdown timer, using the loyalty thing. Seasonality and predictability can really work for you here. People do respond to flash sales. Don't do so many that they become your normal business. We have a number of retailers in the UK who seem to offer flash sales literally 24/7, which then isn't really a flash sale. So be careful with the pacing of this. And of course, with festive season, there is obviously that's going to happen in whichever cultures and whichever religions you're serving. Think about personalizing promotions. Personalization around the festive season is one of those great big hooks that really works when it comes to seasonality. So have a little play with some of those. Some of these ideas are very well researched and they're very predictable. And this is what we're trying to bring in here. We're trying to build in predictability in the seasonality in our marketing. And of course, let's build into our marketing plans the metaverse, digital connection, holistic well-being, and this whole idea about being sustainable and purpose-driven, because those can be overarching themes that we know are coming. So those are the bigger, more strategic themes. So whilst we're doing our little local tactical stuff this month, this week, today, always have in mind that these big overarching themes are going to be here. Kondratieff tells us it's coming. It absolutely is coming. All of the research shows that these are going to be the big three. So we need to build these into our marketing going forward. So we've got a very, very interesting opportunity coming. So what I want to hear from you on the chat here is, kind of just give me some ideas, give me some sort of feedback and ask any questions that we haven't covered here about actually what you can do to make this a reality for you. So I've given you a lot of ideas to think about. I've suggested that you answer the question, which things impact on me the most, which particular cycles affect me. We've had a question here from Sam. Sam says, what's the best way to share this with my boss? That's a great question, Sam. Thank you for that one. I think probably the best way to share the idea with your boss is to maybe share some of the bigger picture stuff and just the idea that this is coming and we have to take this thing seriously. But I think probably at a more local level is go and collect some evidence, go and collect some data, figure out what it is you feel will add value from this whole thing about bringing seasonality in, and going to have a little look in your social analytics or on Google Analytics, or look at some of your sales data and see if you can see patterns. And the other thing which I really, really liked was the thing I shared about looking at your email database or your customer database and seeing if you can find in there anything that really, really shows that certain people are doing certain things at certain times, because that for your boss will be the evidence that they need to give them the confidence to invest time and energy in this. So I think that's a really, really helpful one. Another question here from Liz. Thank you. Actually, thank you for this one, Liz. This is interesting. Where is a good source of live data? Okay, so we've talked here about trends and the kind of the big picture, but Liz is asking for live data. You can do a lot of searches on this one. The one I always am fascinated by, because this brings in a whole range of different sources, is worldometers.info. So that's worldometers.info. And that is a live stream of current data that looks day to date, month to date, year to date. And some of the numbers in there are absolutely mind-blowing. So I would suggest that you look there. I think that's possibly on the, it's a great question, Liz, and thank you for asking. It might be on the periphery of kind of predictability, but it might be something that just backs up and gives you that extra little bit of data to support one of your conversations internally. And I'm not sure whether that in itself would drive a strong level of evidence for all of us, but go and have a little play, because data is great. Data allows you to open up new questions and ask those questions of, the information that you found. So that possibly is going to be quite a good one. There's another question from John. Marielle, thank you. Yes, lots of interesting information, lots of new things learned. Thanks a lot. So thank you, Marielle. That's great. Lovely to hear that. John asks the question, how can I learn from other markets? Yeah, that's an interesting one. Learning from other markets, often if you go to the marketplace's trade association or industry association or regulator or governing body, they often produce white papers. Now, some of those might be a year or two old, or maybe even slightly longer, but it might give you a little bit of a feel for kind of what's going on in that industry. And I'm guessing, John, there, either you're looking for a new job or and you're looking to break into a new industry, so you want to gather some data as to whether it's a good one, or you might be looking at that because you're looking to get new customers in a new industry. So I'll assume it's the latter. So yeah, I would think look at the industry's trade association or governing body. They will undoubtedly do a number of different research projects and stuff. So yeah, the data is there. I think you can always guess that the data is there, and that is really, really strong starting point for you. Yeah, that's probably the best way of answering that one. On the Q&A I've got from an anonymous attendee, thank you, whoever you are, you'll know who you are. It says, what about from a professional services aspect? We can't really offer sales and discounts at low peaks, so what would you suggest instead? That's a nice one. And I think I just really reiterate my comment earlier about the professional intimacy. If you can find times of the year where certain customers, and I don't know whether you're talking here about professional services from a business to business perspective or a business to consumer perspective, but either really this would apply to, is if you look at your customer relationship records, so you look at all of your customer data, if you can spot some times of the year when you see these kind of real low points, when you see low amounts of purchase of your service, and I don't know which professional service you're in, but it doesn't really matter because this would apply to all professional services. If you can spot those quieter times, I think at those times it's all about maybe offering things like maybe online conferences or events or summits, get interaction to build the relationship. So maybe you're offering kind of free sort of coaching or consultancy, or you bring them along to talk about at a particular conference or webinar, a particular subject that would resonate with them. See if by doing those deep dives into looking at the data, whether they're buying certain products that mean that they might be interested in something that you do, that you don't necessarily sell to them, but you actually offer, advice and guidance, but do it one-to-many. I think this is all about trying to uncover the one-to-many opportunities. And then maybe you do like a live webinar or something like that, or you could pre-record something and offer it out as a sort of a white paper or a vlog or an interview or something like that. So infill those quieter times where you know that you're not going to get sales because you're seasonal. Infill those times with something that builds the relationship. Because if you do that and your competition aren't, and you're going to be in a very, very busy competitive industry there, if you do that when others are really just going quiet and they're ignoring the customers, that stands you a much, much stronger chance of being there and relevant when this customer is ready to buy. So yeah, infill with the free stuff, I think, is probably the best advice I can give you. So some great questions. Thank you very much for asking those questions. I think that's sort of got us to a point where I think we can probably say that we are done on this particular episode. Hopefully you found it really, really interesting. And I would say, make sure you factor in those three big picture things: the metaverse and digital connection. I'm going to be doing a lot more over that in the coming sessions that I'm going to be doing here in this series. Holistic well-being, find out how you can make your customers feel better in their world. So really give them great personal outcomes and really, really see if you can add value to their world in a well-being sense. And purpose-driven sustainability, that is not going to go away. And I'm going to announce shortly a new series of events and things on that topic in isolation, because it's a really important one that we all need to be aware of. So the only final thing for me to really share with you is kind of what comes next. So the next session in this Cambridge Marketing College series, which you can find at marketingcollege.com/events, is on the 11th of February. And this is one that is very much in here by popular demand. A lot of people have been saying, okay, now I'm doing lots of online events as much as events in my team. Could you do, and this is, I'm paraphrasing here, but could you do a webinar focusing solely on running more effective meetings? And so the answer is yes. So that is the very next one that we're going to do. I'm looking forward to that one. I've been hosting quite a few actually in-house events and workshops on this whole idea about running effective meetings internally and with customers. So we're going to touch on both of those things. So if you're looking to take hold of particularly online meetings, I think for most of us, that's kind of where this is going. So if you want to be doing meetings in Teams or in Zoom or wherever you happen to sort of meet as a team, but also where you serve customers in multidisciplinary team meetings. So it might be that you are bringing sort of customers into teams. I'm going to be covering all of that, the best tech to use, the best way to structure the meeting, how to plan it, how to carry it out, how to involve everybody. There's a whole bunch of different tips and research that I want to share with you on that one. So if you haven't signed up for that one and you're available on the 11th of February, it'd be great to see you on that one. And as always, if we're not already connected, I'd love to connect with you. So you can find me on social at Neil Wilkins X, and I'll be sharing obviously everything that comes up in this series and all the other kind of things that I'm broadcasting right here, right now on very, very similar topics. There are lots of very consistent themes right here, right now. So it'd be great to see you in social, and let's connect. It'd be lovely to follow each other. And I want to be watching your stories and actually how you're putting all this stuff into practice as well. So yeah, it's been great to connect with you today. Thank you so much for attending. Have a great day, whatever else you're doing. And remember, keep an eye on all those little cycles and loops and habits. And hopefully I will see you on a webinar similar to this very, very soon.